Hi, I'd like to talk to you guys today about Ayurvedic medicine. I got my Ayurvedic diploma back in about 2002 or 2003. Studied with the American Institute of Vedic Studies in New Mexico. Dr. David Frawley was the teacher, although I did it by correspondence. I have studied Ayurveda. I've read a lot about it in other sources as well. Ayurveda basically means the science of living, and it's the ancient medicine of India. So it's also called yogic medicine. So it's medicine practiced along with yoga and meditation and that sort of thing. But it's a very comprehensive system of what I would call naturopathic medicine. So Ayurveda has as its basis the idea of spiritual health being primary, and then mental, emotional, and physical following on from good, healthy spiritual practice. So it also very much distinguishes between different constitutions of people, and it's an elemental system of medicine. So they very much look at the earth, water, fire, air, ether elements as being the basis of the material aspect of medicine, without going into the mind, intelligence, false ego that they talk about as well. But they have what they call three different constitutions, or doshas. And those doshas being Pitta, which is fire and water, so it kind of makes up oil in the body. And the Pitta element represents things like intelligence and get up and go, fieriness. So when it's in balance, a person can have a lot of intelligence and get up and go. When it's too much, the person gets a red face and can have a lot of high blood pressure, that sort of thing, and be overly stressed. It also represents what's called the Agni, or the digestive fire in a person. All right, so in Ayurveda, the concept of metabolism is basically Agni, or digestive fire. And having a good digestive fire means you basically absorb the nutrients from your food. If your digestive fire is weak, not enough fire, you don't digest food properly, and you can get more what they call ama, or toxins. Toxins can also come through your diet. Poor diet can produce a lot of ama, and then the ama suppresses the digestive fire. Just like if you put a lot of toxic substances onto a fire that don't burn very easily, it can put the fire out or make it smolder and produce toxins. So the concept of Agni and ama are very important in Ayurveda. The next constitution is Vata, which is air and ether. That regulates our nervous system, and it regulates things like communication and ideas. When a person has too much Vata, they can be very dry, because it's also dry, so they get dry skin. But the mind can be overly active without groundedness. So a person who has too much Vata is what in English we might call something like a space cadet or an airhead. And they just talk about superficial things without any real substance or anything, and it's like gossip and things like that. So the organ ruled by Vata is the large intestine, and they actually in Ayurveda say it's important to let wind out through farting and things like that if you have too much Vata. So that's quite interesting as well, releasing excess Vata through the large intestine. The next one is Kapha. Kapha is earth and water, so the soil, obviously we got the ground here, the soil is Kapha. And Kapha gives you sort of substance and muscle. Pitta also gives you muscle, but Kapha is very much about the strength of the body. And it also produces calmness in the mind, so it helps you to sleep well and a feeling of peacefulness when done properly. So it also represents phlegm, and when you have too much Kapha, you can easily get things like colds and stuff where you get too much phlegm in the body. So we need to regulate the balance of the elements in Ayurveda. The other major concept to think about with Ayurveda is what they call like the modes of material nature. So sattva, tamas, and rajas. Okay, sattva means purity, and it represents a high platform for the goal of Ayurveda, the goal of life according to Ayurveda, which is meditation on the Supreme. So sattva is things like healthy foods, healthy vegetarian foods in particular. Dairy products can be sattva if they're raised in the Vedic way, which is to care for the cows, not kill the boys, that sort of thing, no hormones. But generally speaking, it's fresh fruits and vegetables, grains, beans, nuts, seeds, that sort of thing. And that produces this healthiness, and also what's called, it's like translates sattva as goodness. The next guna, which is what these are called in Ayurveda, is rajas, which means passion. So a lot of foods like chilies and hot foods and garlic and that can be more increasing in passion. And that can be agitating on the mind according to Ayurveda, because the goal of Ayurveda and yoga is to produce a mind that is calm. And it can produce redness and that sort of thing, but it's good for getting certain things done. So a lot of business people and hard-driven people can be rajasic, or having rajas. The next one is tamasic, or ignorance. So it's a kind of lowering of the consciousness mode, and that's foods that produce tamas are stale and dried foods, old foods, alcohol, and meats in particular are very tamasic, but basically foods that are devitalized. So a lot of processed foods and things like that are going to not aid in the goal of Ayurveda, which is to elevate the consciousness in the body and produce a healthy body. So tamasic food is some of the worst food, and a tamasic state of consciousness is very unhealthy from an Ayurvedic point of view. So they're quite interesting, because you can combine the gunas with a dosha. So a person could be, for example, a Pitta dosha and have a guna of either sattva, rajas, or tamas. So a Pitta person with a sattvic place might be a spiritual leader, still have the fire of Pitta and the drive and the intelligence, but it's done in a way that's creating goodness and peace on the planet. Whereas somebody who's more Pitta and rajasic might be somebody who's like a hard-driven businessman, may be selfish though. It may or may not be producing any benefit other than for himself or his family. And a tamasic Pitta person would be more like a mafia leader, or somebody who's actually causing trouble on the planet, but they're fiery by nature. So the same can be said of Vata. You can have sattvic Vata, somebody who's a great communicator and who's communicating about ideas that are helping people and good for the planet, Whereas you could have somebody who's Vata and rajasic, who's again just talking, maybe in a sort of fiery way or a rajasic way, a passionate way, but it's not actually helping people. You might get some commentators on different news programs that could be like this, and they're just really spreading gossip, or they're doing stuff like that. And the same could be said of a Vata tamasic person, is maybe talking about stupid ideas that are really based in ignorance and actually not helping anybody or the planet, And sattvic Kapha, on the other hand, can be one of the most peaceful and aspired after in Ayurveda constitutions, because it's like earth and water, like a cow, basically, a very peaceful cow in Ayurveda. And obviously Ayurveda has a lot of respect for cows, is an animal associated with sattvic Kapha. It's peaceful and loving and calm. So that's also a great thing to aspire to, whereas somebody could be Kaphic and be rajasic, and they're again maybe overweight in the negative way, and aspiring for things that are not necessarily good for them or good for others. And even more so with tamasic Kapha, it's more like a really stagnant person who's just filled with junk food and things like that, and not really producing anything of any value to themselves or the world. So those are important concepts of Ayurveda. There's a lot of other ones, but those are some of the ones I use a lot in my thinking about people. So when I'm diagnosing people, I often use the elemental basis of Ayurveda to diagnose people. I think, does this person have too much air? Do they have too much fire? Do they have too much phlegm, or all of them? So massage, they say, should be done at a harder level with Kaphic people, medium with Pitta, and lighter on Vata people, because Vata people tend to be more air, and so it's easy to move air, whereas it's harder to move earth. You have to dig, I call it excavation. So it's interesting to think about these elements and elemental imbalances, because it's also a fundamental principle of Chinese medicine, which we'll go into in another video. And they have a slightly different way of looking at elements, because they include wood as an element and metal, and they don't have air or ether. Ether in Ayurveda, which is what Vata is composed of, is what's they look at it as being what's beneath air. So, for example, outside of the Earth's atmosphere, where there is no air, there's ether. That's the Ayurvedic definition of ether, not necessarily the scientific one. So, massage, has had a long history in India, and they'll use even different herbally medicated oils. So, I use a lot of oils from Banyan botanicals in the United States, although they do a lot of their farming in India, but they use a lot of organic farming methods, which is important when you're getting Ayurvedic products, because unfortunately a lot of the big, companies that promote these herbicides and pesticides and things like that have made a lot of inroads into India, and there's some corruption that's allowed them to use these products that can be quite dangerous and overuse them. And there's companies like obviously Monsanto have had a lot of problems in India, where they've been promoting products that seeds that can't be reproduced, and farmers get into debt to them and commit suicides on a mass scale, that sort of thing. So using organic herbally medicated oils is something I highly recommend. Obviously you can make them from your garden if you have a nice garden or want to get a nice garden. A lot of people think having a garden's a luxury, but we actually purchased this property much cheaper than we could purchase a one-bedroom apartment in Sydney or Melbourne, or in most big cities in the world. So, if you get out of the big cities, you can actually purchase a bit of land, and then it's just a case of using things like permaculture and just building up the soil and things, and you can grow a lot of plants yourself, and it's a wonderful way to raise children. As I'm starting to do some videos with my daughter just about naturopathic methods of farming and that sort of thing. And it's also just a peaceful environment to live in. So yeah, basically have a check out of Banyan Botanicals and their Ayurvedic oils. I highly recommend them. They do have even a distributor in Australia as well. You can, if you have any questions, if you can't find them online, just shoot me an email and I'll help you out, or shoot me a message on the comment section. But yeah, they'll use they have special oils designed for Pitta, Kapha, and Vata, which have herbs in them that they really rub into the body, and then use massage as a way to get the oils into the body. So through the skin and into the blood and the circulation, and then the oils contain those herbs, which then affect the person. So Ayurveda has a different approach to massage in that way. One of its primary purposes is to get herbs into the body. It has a secondary purpose of getting rid of tension as well. But yeah, it's an interesting system of medicine and an interesting system of massage. So there's a lot to Ayurveda, but those are some of the primary things that I like to use a lot in my practice. But the importance, in my opinion, of spiritual health is something I really take from Ayurvedic medicine, and that idea that spiritual health is the most important aspect of health, and then the others are based upon it, because all the other ones are temporary, of course, by nature. So, as I say, Ayurveda goes into a lot of spiritual concepts and that sort of thing, and there are differences of opinion within the Ayurvedic community over the spiritual concepts, as there has been throughout the history of Indian philosophy. That's something I have studied a lot. Philosophy and comparative religion and that sort of thing have been some of the subjects I studied at university, and continue to study 30 years later. But yeah, highly recommend learning about Ayurveda. All right, that's it for me for now, and I'll do some more videos.